Since before the dawn of time, mankind has had one primary motivating desire: not to pay full retail price. Something about getting the best discount possible has driven us to travel further than necessary to acquire our new possessions. But what happens when we can't get the thing we want and we don't want to resort to theft to obtain it? That's where the topic of today's video comes into play: the smugglers. For such a general topic, there was a whole host of information on what is allowed and what is not allowed when it comes to skirting import laws. You can thank Mystara's focus on commerce and economics, which our gazetteers hammered home. It's time to meet the smugglers, the smuggled, and how the smuggling gets done. Welcome to Mystara. I'm Mr. Welch, and we're going to do what they say can't be done. We've got a long way to go and a short time to get there. Smuggling works both ways. Some nations want to keep certain items out, or at least without taxing them, and some things they want to keep inside their borders. These things are usually high value or essential to the nation one way or the other. If you want to buy goods created by the reclusive Elk clan, you just can't order them from Aurora's Whole Realms catalog. You will need people to know how to get these things across the border without getting noticed. For mundane items, the trick is getting past the tax collectors who want to cut all your profits. For unique items, the risk is often relatively high, not just for the smugglers, but also for the person looking to buy the wares. If you get caught crossing the border with derrick and fabrics, you're looking at a fine and maybe some jail time. Getting caught with a Blackmore device that an Alfheim noble wanted so they could press all the pretty flashing blinking buttons, and there's going to be all sorts of uncomfortable questions asked with you in all sorts of uncomfortable positions. The first category of smuggled goods is the boring mundane items. These are brought across borders with the sole purpose of reselling them at lower prices to the local population. These goods typically undercut local merchants, mainly if the country they're being smuggled from can mass produce said items in bulk. Karamikos puts tariffs on derrick and foodstuffs because their northern neighbor can produce enough food to feed both nations and then some. If derrick and grain is allowed unchecked, the farmers of Threshold can't compete. So the amount of imports is limited and taxed. Now, if you want to get some cheap foreign grain, you gotta get it across the border. These are the least dangerous goods to smuggle because nobody's going to execute you for selling discounted House Umbarth pans, except maybe Minrathad. Okay, especially Minrathad. The smugglers will then sell these goods to merchants directly or to a middleman who deals with the distribution independently. A more dangerous good to handle is prescribed items, which are banned for either import or export. Items deemed vital to a nation's defense or a threat to it fall into this category. Ethengar forbids the export of horses except with the Great Khan's express permission, and he's not handing that out to just anyone. Minrathad has a one-way policy on magic items. They will buy all that you can sell them, but don't even bother asking if you are a buyer. Alphatia places heavy restrictions on Zonga, banning it from transport even between its nations. Not that that stops anyone. Caught violating these rules can be anything from a prison sentence to execution. Then you get to the highly adventurous goods, and that's the smuggling of people. Quite a few individuals need ingress or egress from a particular region, and they need it done discreetly. This is usually due to a local prohibition, and it's often more dangerous for the person being smuggled than the smuggler. Slaves are a common group in this category. Abolitionists getting freed slaves to safe regions, or factions like the Iron Ring needing to get newly acquired unpaid interns into regions that outlaw the practice. Getting Hen out of Glantry or clerics into it is a constant source of income for smugglers. Another group needing discreet transportation is criminals, especially when they have a price on their heads, meaning they can only resort to people they really trust. Magical items are a high-risk and high-reward commodity that always has a market somewhere. They're also one of the more difficult cargoes to transport because the people looking for them tend to have the proper means to find them. Gemstones might fetch a hefty price in the right market, but not many wizards have a Detect Rubies spell. Detect Magic is available to every arcane spellcaster at first level. Finding a buyer is a problem. With very few exceptions, you just can't sell these things publicly. Even in Glantry, you need a rather expensive license to hawk your +1 magic sword. Other nations like Yalarm outright prohibit it. Transporting magic items in bulk will often require magic and a buyer already lined up. Then there are the national treasures, relics, and similar items considered sacred or vital to specific nations. Smuggling these is the equivalent of taking your life into your own hands, because if you get caught, you will be fortunate to get any trial, much less a fair one. The runestones in the northern reaches, anything regarding the Radiance back in Glantry, demi-human clan relics, technological blueprints of gnomish or dwarven devices, or anything related to the Irendi fireships are a few things that will get you executed on the spot if found in your possession. These will be high-level adventures because even if you manage to get your hands on one, the former owners or national interests will hunt you no matter the distance. Worse, allies of that nation will also return it if found in their borders, and the people looking to buy it will often try to cover up all loose ends so nobody knows they have it. By loose ends, I mean player characters. Clan relics that are the target of smugglers are often the smaller items made from the iconic relics. It doesn't matter if you're a 36th level thief acrobat who is a borderline deity from all the artifacts you have managed to acquire, including the personalized source of your own immortality in the form of your own soul. Even you can't nick a tree of life from Alfheim. You will have problems getting your hands completely around the trunk. But you can make off with the cloaks, arrows, swords, and bows made from one. Doesn't matter who you hire to get this stuff out of the nation. The previous owners will come looking for them and have no objections to extracting information by force with spells. Or tongs. Just be warned if you want to go this route. If you need something moved secretly, finding a smuggler can be tricky. Few of them advertise their services, at least openly. The reason why you hire one rather than just doing it yourself is smugglers will have specific information and tools that will make it easier to get the desired relocation. They know the best routes to take, which guards take bribes, and what precautions people have taken to stop them, as well as various methods of hiding their cargo from unwanted questions. This can be anything as complicated as a wizard capable of teleportation, or as simple as a hidden compartment on a wagon for smaller items. You are hiring them for their information as much as you're hiring them for their trickery. They will tell you the best way to get out of the country, and most of the time, require you to leave them alone and let them do their work. Finding one can be tricky, but most thieves' guilds will have their own smugglers or know how to hire independents. If you need something brought into a region or transported a short distance, hiring a guild smuggler is best. They will have numerous options from different sources to help them and have a good grasp of the local laws and, more importantly, geography. If you need something to cross national borders, you're going to need a specialist. The local smuggler from Threshold might know the best way to get your stolen goods to Kelvin, but they won't know the best routes into the wilds of Yalarum. Specialists will charge more, but they will usually be more experienced and have a network to move the goods. Many of them will have a front in the form of a merchant house or other business that explains why they would be moving specific cargo to a region. Expect to pay 10% of the cargo's value to your smuggler minimum, and that price will go up the further you have to go and the more unique abilities required to move it. So how do you move the product now that you've figured out what you're transporting? Well, the first method is stealth. If they don't see you, they don't stop you. There's a whole host of ways to do this. Taking little-known routes will avoid most patrols, at the expense of being vulnerable to attacks by monsters and brigands that avoid better patrolled roads. Another option is to disguise or hide the goods if possible. It's difficult to hide larger goods, but you can always move those by sea. Smaller items can be hidden in secret compartments or other mundane cargoes. Getting into cities often require entering under false pretenses, bribing guards, or gaining access to unguarded areas. The dangers of using these methods is if the guards know what to look for, they can negate all the advantages you usually have. Finding the smuggler's routes means patrols start looking for contrabands in formerly safe areas. The fact that you have to avoid more commonly used roads leads you open to attack to highwaymen or the like. Bringing in goods by ships leaves you significantly exposed when transferring the goods to shore. This being a fantasy setting, there's always magic. That is far more expensive as teleport spells are relatively high level, and invisibility spells have dedicated counters in the form of other spells or magical creatures that can be trained, or even built, to keep an eye out for smugglers. Worse, Mystara wizards have many spells that deliberately target those using teleportation to move in or out of an area. This is typically the case in Glantry, where you would be hard-pressed to find a palace, bank, or merchant house unprotected from teleportation. Glantry City also has an anti-teleportation enchantment over the city itself. You must physically enter it to gain access. This spell was initially meant to prevent assassinations, but worked well against smugglers. Some spells can detect teleportation arrivals, track where the spellcaster has been transported, or redirect people to a different area when they arrive. The powers that be in the magic-friendly nations are very aware of the usefulness of magic in evading inspections, and have planned accordingly. You can also try to fly the good ends, but that has risks. Flying creatures normally can't carry much, restricting the cargo to just what's being handled usually. Sure, you can try to use a larger creature like a rock or a dragon, but those are going to be spotted miles before they arrive. Not to mention it raises all sorts of attention when you start unloading cargo from your giant bird that just landed in the city square. There's not a lot of places to land large creatures unnoticed. That means you must take your goods to a predetermined location and hope nobody sees you. But that leaves the problem of getting the smuggled goods into the city on foot again. A single unidentified rider on a flying mount is also quite suspicious, and if you are noticed flying near a populated area, you can be sure that they will start tracking your progress. Making things harder, or easier, for smugglers are the merchant princes of Darrican and Minrathad. These nations have crafted special magics specifically for detecting contraband or tracking people trying to cook the books. Trying to report one item as another is thwarted with spells that automatically detect such falsehoods. Other spells will tell the caster the exact weight and cargo on wagons or in ship holds, so something that weighs too much or not enough will get detected. Minrathad, however, routinely smuggles its own goods into foreign markets and develops spells that serve the opposite purpose. They have developed enchantments that make it impossible to detect falsehoods in invoices, disguise one cargo as another, or mask hidden cargoes with illusions. Not all Minrothadian merchant princes do this, and the other nations haven't caught on yet. That's smuggling in Mystara, how it's done, what it's done to, and how they stop you. So if you need to get your magical sister out of the country safely, you know what to do. Next week, we are headed to Glantry to look at House Sorochia, the most paranoid of all the principalities. Remember, stock up on antidote. Until next time, go on, take the money and run.